And now the question will be much more in the next, I think, 4 years, will be much more to make companies more resilient and to make projects more resilient.
Hi, this is your PM Cowboy, actually 2 PM Cowboys coming back to you in 2025. I have the pleasure of having a guest back for the first time, Oliver Lehmann, I guess one of the foremost PM Cowboys in the south of Germany.
Thanks for having me.
He came to us last time to talk about a topic which I thought was really, really exciting, and that is the topic of project business management, which was the topic that focuses on the fact that internal and external projects are actually similar but not the same and have to be managed also in a different way. And he contacted me before the year 2024 was up, and he said, listen, why don't we get together? I've got a hot topic. And he spoke to me a couple minutes on the phone, and I was on fire for it. I'm actually saying a little bit of the translation from German. And the topic for this podcast today is the cost of chaos. Now, why would we talk about this in 2025? I think a lot of people have a premonition from 2024 based on some of the issues that we're going to be talking about in the podcast, that every new year has an incredible potential for growth, for advancement, for good things, but potentially also for a number of different things that might challenge us in our day-to-day. And I think most people have that premonition for 2025 that there's a lot of things around the corner that will challenge us. And so I think the cost of chaos is a great, great topic for our first podcast for 2025. You've introduced yourself last time extensively, but maybe you can do it just shortly so for the new listeners, they know where you come from and what your function is.
My name is Oliver Lehmann. I have just right now 30 years anniversary as a trainer in...
I'm 25. I'm 5 years behind you.
Good. We'll never catch up.
No.
30 years anniversary as a trainer. My focus is project management. One of the focus areas inside project management is certification, is PMP and Carpe and some more. And the other big thing is projects.
And we shouldn't, I'm not going to let you slide. You also offer certification for business, project business managers.
But this is now the second part.
Yes,
That's the second part, exactly. And that's project business management. Project business management is the topic of having a project with at least 2 organizations involved, one as a customer, one as a contractor. There may be hundreds of organizations involved in big projects. And the more organizations you have involved, the more likely it is that you will run into difficulties, into trouble, into conflicts, and many, many other things. It's more likely that things will go wrong than that they will go very, very well. So this is where I try to make people aware of the challenges and help them meet the challenges.
A friend of mine once wrote a book, and she had a wonderful German name for it, but translated it is also interesting. She talked about, since we're talking about chaos, she called it the constant, what did she call it? The constant fear or volatility that shapes the market. And I think it's a little bit what we're going to be talking about. Der fortwährende Ausnahmezustand is what we call it in German.
Yeah.
So tell us, where did your motivation for this topic come up?
I don't want to get too political, first of all.
But we'll skirt on the surface.
We have to be a bit careful here. Of course, I have friends who are very much very, very positive about the situation that is now coming up. I have more friends, by the way, who are very negative about that. Yeah. But the question is, what does it mean for the people we care for as trainers? They pay us for that, to be honest, but we care for as trainers. Project managers, in my special case, managers in project business. On contractor side, project managers doing customer projects for paying customers, paying clients. And also on the other side, for those who work projects with networks of contractors, not just one contractor helping out here and there, but really giving away a lot of work to them. And they may have subcontractors and subcontractors and so on. So what is the situation that we can foresee now to some degree? What does it mean for them? Where are the tripwires for them? Where are the caveats for them? And what can they do to to protect themselves. Yeah, I think what we'll see, and I think that's the basis of this talk here. What we'll see at the moment is a change in an upcoming change in what is most important for organizations. The last, I would say, 5, 10, maybe more years, were very much driven by terms such as growth and innovation, and so it was always the looking forward part. It was always the big ideas, the big fantasies maybe that some people had and then tried to implement. And now the question will be much more in the next, I think, 4 years, will be much more to make companies more resilient and to make projects more resilient.
So I think I would agree with you. I think a lot of companies have understood that the only way to survive in midterm or long term is to stay on the innovative focus of things. But I would agree with you. I think that the last 10 years, there's been some ups and downs in the economy, and Corona was the first, I think, shock to the system, the global system. But I think most companies still had the feeling, hey, innovation is something we can do without having to worry too much about major upheavals. And I would agree with you. Our position here is not to maybe judge the individual political stances so much, but to evaluate these new political systems that are coming into power right now are advocating a change, massive change. And what we want to entertain is what possible impact that will have for companies that are doing business and how to kind of prepare for it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I guess where we can start is, and I've got this wonderful paper that you wrote for the PM World Journal. Yep. I really, really liked it, also with the title of Cost of Chaos. We'll put a link in the bottom if you want to read it. You start off with one of my familiar friends in here, which I think is a great tool. I think when we're talking about difficult situations, and I was just reading a book that I showed you before we went on the air, a book on wicked problems, and it was quite an interesting and entertaining and educational book to read, and it kind of talked about the fact that problems are part of the recipe. If you're in business, there is no such thing as not being exposed to certain threats. Kind of like based on the principle, if you don't have any problems, you're not alive. Okay, I like the distinction that they made in wicked problems, where they say there's tame problems and there's wicked problems. Wicked problems are problems that are usually a mess of multiple problems that cannot be fixed or have to be continually adhered to. But we're going a little bit into detail. But this tool that we're talking about here is the PESTLE tool. And one of the things this book said in wicked problems is, if you have a wicked problem, the best way to move forward is to take a slice of that wicked problem and define it and figure out where it is. In other words, take something that's complex and make it simple.
Yeah.
And this next tool that we're going to be talking about, the PESTLE tool, right, is a wonderful example of it, right? Probably invented by some American who's in love with acronyms.
It was actually not one person. It was developed over several steps by different persons.
Okay, good. Yeah. I like that. So it was a collaborative
It started
effort.
with PEST. It started with PEST, which is an awful word.
Pest in German is the same thing as plague in English, right?
Exactly.
The Black Plague.
Yes, exactly.
But this is a great example of a management tool that you can use that's very simplistic in its structure, but creates a great foundational approach to defining chaotic and complex situations, right?
Yes. It's a prompt list.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you looked sufficiently at the political side? Have you looked at the economical side, at the social side? Don't ignore any of them, because each of them can come with problems for you.
Now, I think you saw that I did 2 podcasts, one with a former American politician and then with a former PM from the UK, and we talked about leadership there. Let's start off with PESTLE. What are some of the political situations that we're going to have to face in 2025, without judging so much, but just kind of looking at the superficial facts?
Let me start with a little story. Very simple, because these are just things that happened. That took place, and we can make some conclusions, draw some conclusions out of them. There was in the US, under the Trump government, I will not use the name anymore.
Thank heaven.
But there was the time, end of 2018, beginning of 2019, there was, I think, 35 days government shutdown, which meant they could not spend any money at all. I observed this first from a distance because I was approached by one American company and later a second one, astonishingly. And in media by that time, a lot of discussion in TV or in magazines, there was a lot of discussion, what does it mean for the people working for the government as employees? And there was a lot of interviews with them, how they couldn't pay their bills and so on. And that's a valuable thing to do. I'm not criticizing that. No one cared about the contractors working for government. And if you look at the people working for government, most of them don't work directly, at least in US, directly for the government. They work for a contractor and the contractor works for the government.
So they're subcontractors.
Or they work for a subcontractor who works for the contractor who works for government and so on. You have networks there of suppliers. And one of my focus topics is project business. So companies in project business, some of them know me, know my name. And then I was contacted over LinkedIn, of course, by one of them. And they said, we cannot survive that. We have no idea how long it will take. When this began, no one knew how long it will take. But they had invoices, and the invoices were open for payment, and their contact on the government side told them, we cannot pay it. We don't have the money, and we are not allowed to pay it. It is all stopped now at the moment. You have to wait. And for many contractors in project business, one topic is profitability of a project, or to be more accurate, making margins to pay indirect costs, overhead costs, cost of winning new business, and then what remains is profit. So actually it's margins more than profit, but we call it profitability nevertheless. The other big thing is cash flow, because it's very normal in a project. You lay out money for your project and for your customer, and you wait for money to come back so that you can lay out more money. And the risk that they were running out of money was a very, very big one. And the first one asked me, hey, Oliver, we will not be able to survive that way. And then there was a second one approaching me. It seemed to me not quite as critical as the first one, at least how they described it. And they asked me, do you have any help for us? And I had to tell them, sorry, no, I don't, because it's too late. You have to be prepared for a situation like that when it occurs, that you have the financial reserves, that you have the people in reserve that you can use here, that you have customers, a customer base in reserve, that you can say, hey, we cannot use our people in this project at the moment, but there is another customer with another project. Maybe they are happy if we shift over people for some time, and maybe they can do some additional work in this other project for this other customer, and we can build that. If you don't have that, if you are so much focused on government work, this first one was the only customer they had was the government. They didn't have another one. Told them, you can try to find a new one, but your problem will probably be you're not the only one. Others try to do the same. They want to find new customers where they can get some quick cash in so that they can pay their running costs for people and for so many other things, insurances, and I don't know what it's all this. The indirect costs, and it's very hard to win that, and it's actually too late. You have to be there much earlier and ask yourself what will happen to your organization if something like this happens. They all trusted it would never happen, and it did. So.
What you're talking about is kind of a mixture between political and economic factors. I agree that the concept of reserves, which is something that's been in the PMBOK for a long time, is something that I found very few companies formally do. The concept that you have an emergency fund. I think the other economical issue that you talk about is also tied into another heuristic that's often mentioned in the PMBOK as well, is the Pareto principle. There's the old Pareto application in sales that 20% of your customers bring you 80% of your revenue, but only get on your nerves 20% of your time. So there's a strong focus, I think, of a lot of companies maybe ignoring the other 80 potential percent of their business because it's maybe not as lucrative, or it's more time consuming, or it's more demanding, or it requires more customization. So those are two factors. I did want to.
May I add something?
Sure.
The scarcest resource for companies that live on projects, that make their money with projects, contractor companies, the scarcest resource is management attention. If you have management attention, I cannot guarantee you that you will have people and money and equipment and everything available. But if you don't have management attention, all the other resources will be scarce as well. So that's a very important resource, and it is limited. As an asset, it's very limited. So other companies as customers would have meant that management has to pay attention to them. I didn't have the time, the energy. They couldn't do that. They were so consumed by their existing business that they couldn't build this up.
I think this is something that not only companies feel, but I think individuals feel. Is if I were to summarize the first 7 days of the year, of this year, I would say, I have so much in the pipeline, so many things that I have to worry about, so many things that I have passion for that I want to develop and want to work on, but I could theoretically work for the next 3-4 months nonstop, 12, 14 hours a day and not make a penny. Because there's so much that needs to be done, and I think companies are in that dilemma as well, as where to focus. I think they have a lot of them are mission and vision driven, but on the other side they have to look out for the cash flow. So that's the strong economic. But I do want to mention the political from a neutral perspective. I think what we can all agree on, without evaluating good or bad what the political situation is, I think there's going to be a big shift in the system.
Absolutely.
The more established or normed political parties have taken a serious beating because the population feels uncertainty also in their own private pocket, and they're looking for distinct leadership, and they didn't find it. So the hope of the voters out there is to give their vote to a party that has to do something different, okay? And whether we want to evaluate that as being good different or bad different is secondary. It's going to have an impact on your economical situation, because anything that changes the norm of behavior, the decorum, requires a new sense of awareness. How am I going to get paid, in what intervals? I'll give you an example as well. I was in Nigeria on a UNIDO project many years ago. I was the number 2. I was following the lead of a program manager there, and we were full throttle going ahead on a project portfolio that the Nigerian government had commissioned, and then it was an election, and for like 3 months it was a full stop. We were basically sitting in office. We didn't even have electricity in our offices because, I don't know, somehow electricity and finding out who's in charge has an impact, right? So these are all things that we're going to have to, in the peripheral view of doing business, is an additional thing that we're going to have to be aware of. I mentioned a little bit the social factors. Let's go through some of the other. What are your perspectives on social factors? Technology, I think that's a long topic as well. Where do you see the main social factors right now?
If we look into US, the big question, of course, is Medicaid, is Obamacare. It's what will be the future of general healthcare systems. Yeah, I don't think we will have this strong discussion here in Europe, but in Europe the question will be how can we finance them at a time when generations are shifting, when people get older and older, when the number relationship, the numbers of young people, of people in a good working age get smaller and smaller, and of older people like me get more
like us,
okay. Goes up. How can we overcome this imbalance that we're going to see? So these are the big questions that we have, and I think it will be maybe not in the next 4 years, but in the near future, this will be the main topic that we have. It's the imbalance between young people and older people. By the way, a way to resolve this would be to have more migration of people in working age and prepared
which is a classic polemic thing that is constantly upheld by by people that would
Absolutely
would like to come into power to say, hey, listen, let's focus on that. But there's a legitimate need for it because workforce and
I know how it works, what they do. I have a dog, and my dog is very strongly territorial. Yeah, my dog wouldn't need any other dog. Yeah, it's enough to have some people around, no other dog. So it's very, very territorial. So I understand territorial behavior, and that's what these people are waking up. In humans, we also have some territorial behavior.
I think I think it's always important to feel or understand or empathize with the legitimate fear that's attached to it. I think a lot of society feels like, okay, we're not making as much money, our salaries haven't gone up, cost of living has gone up, and I don't have much choice where that's concerned. But if there's one thing that I have influence on whether or not somebody that I know or don't know moves into my cultural area or not is a factor. I'll give you an interesting fact that I picked up a couple years ago. There was a sociologist from Germany who was talking about it. They were talking about that Trachten fashion, so the traditional German, Austrian lederhosen, Dirndl, that sales have gone up over the last decade substantially, and that a lot of the young generations were buying it, and the social justification for it was, in a globalized world where we are becoming more and more alike globally, people kind of have a counter movement where they say, listen, we want to focus on something that creates personal identity, okay? Even if that personal identity is somewhat construed.
This is how it began.
Yeah.
It began after 1871 when Germany was united, except Austria, which stepped outside and was kept outside at the same time. Yeah. And this was the time when this began with Trachten. It wasn't a topic before that time. Yeah. And it began at that time.
It was actually something that was more in the country, and people from the city kind of participated. If they had a house in the country, they would pick it up, but it became fashionable. And even in Vienna, there's two balls in Vienna that are famous. One is the Steirerball, one is the Jägerball, the hunter's ball, where it's very, very common. They don't come in ball gowns. You come in wonderful traditional clothing, although how traditional or not it is a different topic.
It's not really traditional. Yeah. It's traditional-ish.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the social thing that I see at the moment. It's the question of the migration, of course, and the other big question is with the ages, with the generations, the age shift, that people get older, and that people will have to work longer, by the way, which most of them obviously hate. I love it, but other people hate.
I think the demographic thing, if we're going to kind of leave the migration part out of it, is an issue because there's not fewer people coming into the workforce, and they have Generation Z. This has been spoken of several times. It might be a crash generalization, but there's some legitimacy to it. Have a different understanding. They've grown up with a different understanding of what work-life balance is, right? I don't know how many hours you worked when you were in your 20s and 30s, but on average, I never worked less than 60 hours.
Yes. And
I thought that was the norm. If you had the privilege of calling yourself a manager, you didn't have overtime. You just worked. You were there. And I think the newer generations, and there's some legitimacy to it. They're saying, listen, but life is not just about working. So I think these are all social issues. Let's talk briefly about the technological factors. I think the first thing that pops to mind is AI, of course, right?
Of course.
So AI is definitely one of the technological factors that everybody's talking about. Although I often say I think there's complete legitimacy to the conversation of AI, but I don't think that the public awareness of what AI is, what its potential is, and I don't think most corporate executives actually know what the concrete application they're going to use it for right now. I think it will be inevitably a factor that has to be dealt with. But I think for most people, AI is not intelligent. It's just incredibly fast Google, and I'm probably going to piss a couple people off. What's your take on the AI?
The interesting thing is when I look at texts, images, other things that are visible, that's visible AI. There's a lot of AI we don't see. When they do data analytics, we don't see this outside the organization.
There's some legitimate applications that are outside of our consciousness.
If you look at those that are visible, because there's some text you can read, there is some image you can see. In 99% of the cases, with some experience, you see this has been written by AI. This is an image that has been made by AI, or at least augmented. I use it for image augmenting, meanwhile, not so much for making images, but for augmenting images that I have. Yeah. So, or I use it when I write texts, I get some inspiration from that. But I don't want my text to look like AI. Yeah. I immediately identify AI when I see it in 99% of the cases. I don't want people to think the same about me. So they when you read something like this, this is generally written by me, but AI had an inspirational effect.
We don't have a problem with spell checks.
Grammar check and these things. Yes, spell check, all these things. Yeah, that's what I use it for. But what it is just another tool that we have. It's a tool that makes us in some things better. Yeah. As an author, as a writer, I think I'm better by using AI without replacing me. Yeah. I think it's something that makes us here and there faster. Yeah. Actually, it makes me slower. Meanwhile, changing text, changing images. I've spent more time working on that than it saves.
There's still the nitty gritty. But if I'll give you another example. You've probably, because you work in multiple languages as well.
Yes.
One of the great things about is AI is that you can translate.
Absolutely.
You know, and that saves you incredible amount of time.
Absolutely.
I agree with you that when you're talking about true cognitive content, I think you have to participate in development
the process.
Otherwise, it's kind of shallow.
Absolutely.
I think if we're going to talk about technological factors, what I would like to bring into play, I would agree with you. There are applications of AI that most of the common man and woman doesn't see. One that was in the media not too long ago was this issue with the United Healthcare CEO that was unfortunately assassinated in New York. But one of the background stories there was that his company has been using AI for a long, long time to go through the applications. But this is a topic I want to bring out. I think one of the bigger dangers that we have to face with AI, every new technology that comes into play has a potential for doing good and has a potential for doing bad. And I think coming to terms with it, how do we manage it? How do we monitor this? And how do we make sure that it's going in the right direction so that it's not misused? I often say I think one of the biggest dangers of AI is that we're going to eliminate the human factor more and more. And if you call a hotline, you're going to get the answer, no, you're not going to get what you want quicker, without justification and without being able to make a claim against it. I think that's a huge issue. And then the other issue that plays a role in the technological factor, if you are working in an industry that does have serious application for AI, is the increased energy consumption that you're looking for, right? We talked about that kind of before the podcast. Legal and environmental.
Legal in the area where I am in project business management, it's one of the three big areas of risk.
You're talking to us about the contractual issues, right?
Contractual and actual contractual is part of that. Yeah. It's part of that. It's more than that. It is that there are laws how to do business, and different countries have different laws. But a lot of the business we are doing today is international business. So where I see a huge disruptive factor for the next couple of years is that legal systems may get more different again, may start diverging from each other a bit more, because what we see is a growing element of nationalism. Goes back to this territorial thinking.
And people are afraid people will move more in that direction.
Yeah, but the hope that I had in the last decades was that legal systems move nearer together, that they get more similar. Yeah. But now what we see today is that they are going to get more dissimilar again, which will make it very, very hard to do business in an international environment, because the laws that are applicable in your country may not be the same as in another country. You take things for granted.
Would you say that the legal system is partly being economically weaponized to give certain companies globally an advantage over?
I'm sure it happens, but I would generally say that at least for democratic countries, I trust the legal system. I'm not always impressed of what they do, But this is not so much about distrust. This is about people making mistakes. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've seen in multiple continents is that what we thought was the rule of law and the understanding, the norm of law, has also been questioned and challenged to an extreme extent.
Absolutely.
Where what we thought, hey, there must be a law against that, but nowadays we see certain people transcending legal written law and reinterpreting it or changing laws. And we see this on multiple different levels. And I think it's definitely one example that comes to mind that came to terms is I picked this up recently. Supposedly some of these delivery systems like Uber and the different food deliveries companies have gone so far to also create AGBs or contractual requirements that you basically agree to when you order Uber.
Terms and conditions.
And one of the issues that came up in the United States is that there was an accident where an Uber driver was responsible for the accident, and the people who were the passengers were severely injured, but they weren't allowed to sue Uber because when they ordered the Uber, they, without being able to read the 10 pages long legal terms and condition, had agreed to the fact that they have no grounds to legally sue the provider. And these are also legal factors. And by the way, this is not what I'm encouraging you to do as a company. I think you have to come up with terms and conditions that protect you. But I think this is maybe my idealism. You should also create terms and conditions that are customer favorable. Because I think otherwise we're going to have a serious issue. The more this multiplies, the more of a dystopia we get with AI being weaponized against the customer, legal contracts being weaponized against the customer. I think we're going to have a very drastic backlash.
That's a huge difference between the US and Europe at the same time. In Europe, this would not be possible. In Europe, we have the principle of good faith, which means if you have a contract with someone, you take over responsibility that goes beyond the four corners of the contract. That's part of our society, of our legal system in general. If I have a contract to build something for you, I'm your contractor, you are my customer, and you see something that can make my business difficult and make it difficult for me to make money from the work with you, and you see it and you know I cannot see it, you are obliged to tell me, in our European laws.
I think every cultural system has its pros and cons. I think the main difference here, which is also kind of contributes to this difference in the cultural approach here, is the reparations. The amount of money you get if you sue somebody in Europe is
much less.
Much less.
Okay,
that plays.
We don't have these punitive damages that the US have. The other thing with Uber, the solution here is that they say they are just an agency, and you accept and acknowledge that they are just an agency, that they are not part of the business, they are just the agents to enable the business, but they are not a contractual party between the driver and the customer. So that's how they do it here.
I think we're going back again to this social and technological change that's happened over this last several decades. The up and coming companies, Airbnb, which is also has taken some hits in the last couple of years, and there's some legislation against it. Uber, Amazon, eBay, all these different companies are new technologies that have a new business model, which is very lucrative.
I don't think it's new. We had similar business models over decades.
The catalog business is not new, but the technology behind it is different and is accelerated.
The asset light business is not new.
But I'm talking from a social perspective. I think what we've unleashed this new technology accelerant.
Yes.
Okay. Without understanding what drawbacks it has. I mean, I'll give you a clear example. I mean, let's face it. These online stores are putting brick and mortar stores partly
out of business,
right?
Yep.
But they don't have the same legal liabilities. They don't pay the same taxes. These are all things that government is going to have to catch up to to create an even playing ground. Because otherwise, you have the problem that the money is going to Ireland, where the headquarters of some of these companies are, or somewhere else, Cayman Islands, or wherever it might be. So these are issues, social issues, and political issues that I think are important to deal with. Let's move on from the PESTLE. In your paper, you had written that projects will become more expensive.
Yes.
Okay. What's your grounds for that statement?
We have to cover the cost of chaos. Cost of chaos means the cost of those things that are fundamentally unpredictable. Yeah? We learned as risk managers, as project risk managers, we learned to deal with certain type of risk. Yeah? It's mostly variation risk. Yeah? Something will take us a year to finish. Maybe we can do it in 10 months. Maybe we can do it in 14 months or so. So there is some playground around this 1 year or so. But that's variation. That's a natural variation we have here. Now for the future, we will see more aleatoric risk, which is as such unpredictable. Things happen that no one expected
so
to happen.
So the range of potential risk will be higher?
It's not only the range, it's the kind of risk. It's the risk when you throw dice. Yeah. It's not about distribution. It's about the question, what is the next number you will see there? Yeah. And
the randomness of it.
Yeah, but it's not the randomness in form of variation. Variation has its own randomness. Yeah. As soon as you have 4, 5, 6 dice, then you bring randomness in again in form of variation. But if it's only one, then what you have is aleatoric risk. It could be this or that or that, yeah? Or something unexpected could happen. It falls down to the ground or so, which you try to avoid, but sometimes it happens. Yeah, unpredictable. We will see things that surprise us.
Black swans? Is that
the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
We were dealing mostly with the known unknowns, with things that we can identify. We can take some preparations. We can have reserves. Important element of risk management is reserves, but that's something we can do with the known unknowns. But now we have the unknown unknowns. We should have reserves for them too, but we don't know how much we need, because we don't know how much damaging this may be to us. And the government shutdown, 2018, 2019 was, to me, the perfect example of such a situation. It was, at least for those people who suffered from that, it was not predictable. And some people deeply in politics may have said, okay, may happen, but generally no one really expected that. And then it was just there, and it was too late for companies to respond to that. They should have responded to that risk
also
a year ago, maybe.
From a financial perspective, how much cash flow you have or how much you have in reserves is something that's reviewed on an annual basis. And if you have a lot of money that's tied up in a company, you might have shareholders who say, why aren't you investing it somewhere else instead of holding it in reserve? So these are this will be a big.
It's worse. That's a point, but there's a much worse point. What is if you take the sum of the margins of the different projects a contractor company has? Maybe they have 20 projects at the same time. They have costs. They have revenues. The difference between those two is the margins. Then with the sum of these margins, with the total margins, they have to cover their indirect costs, administration and these things. And then they have the cost of winning new business as another cost factor. Two types of indirect costs.
Or reacquiring a new market with a new product, or reacquiring a market after it's gone cold.
I would put this under cost of winning new customers or winning new business, because this is just business in another market. Yeah. I would but it's an expensive thing to do. Winning new business is an expensive thing to do. Administration is an expensive thing to do. Now, if you look, okay, we have these margins from the projects, so many percent. Then we have to deduct from the sum of the margins. We have to deduct these indirect costs. How much is remaining there? And when I ask people in their companies, how much do you really have? Companies that live on projects, on doing projects for other organizations, the typical numbers are between 5 and 10%. And this is insufficient to build monetary reserves.
Okay, so if you're talking about low margin, business,
I'm not talking about low margin. The margins may be quite high, but the indirect costs to make the business to win this high margin projects is also expensive. So they are not spending the money in the project. They are spending in developing new, paying business, and it's expensive to develop well-paying business.
I think we're talking about another social, political, and financial issue here that I just recently spoke to a former board member. I won't mention the company because I don't want to pass on any information that we hadn't agreed upon beforehand. But this board member was telling me of a situation where this large conglomerate who had bought up a lot of local, national companies had a series of different CEOs that came in and streamlined the business, okay? They would close down one production site, although that production site was well established within the community, the local community, had tradition in that community, had actually fairly good local sales, but purely out of numbers, they said, no, we're going to close, we're going to reduce this location here without telling anybody. We're going to kind of do it in secrecy. We're going to cover the production from the next city. And although this was a violation of tradition and local understanding of this company, the argument was, and the local factory had a margin of somewhere around 24%, P&L. And that still wasn't good enough. The company was demanding 32, 34%, which I'm like, are we killing part of our potential economy by an exaggerated understanding of what profitability, how high profitability needs to be? If you look at the German automobile industry, which is in dire straits right now, partly through competition from China, partly through
it's not the Chinese competition.
I wouldn't say it's completely them, but some of their economic decisions they made and investments, and which is part of the game. I'm not even criticizing here, but I often ask myself the question: are we as a society kind of subject to what I call a profit growth mania, where we think that if we have a good product, we have to have exponential growth for eternity, and that's unrealistic. I think this is a societal and political and economical issue that most companies, I think most companies, if they would say, listen, you know what, let's only grow so far because the market only gives you so much, and we can live well and we won't be in dangers, and then we'd be able to cover the margins or the reserves for unexpected technological shifts or disruption or black swans. I think that strategic awareness is lacking a little bit. What's your opinion there?
We are at a topic where one of my favorite metaphors of project management applies again, and this is navigating between two monsters. There's a monster on the right.
Which I think we had it on the classical wicked problem, right?
Yeah. I think we discussed this already in our first talk. Navigating between two monsters means there's a monster on the right, there's a monster on the left, and you have to find your way between those two. Yeah. Could be trade-offs. It could simply be, this is the right way to go. Yeah, you see, waterfall and agile. There is something in the middle.
Yeah, there's absolutely.
There is something in between. Yeah. So what we see here is, on the one side, we see greed. Greed is a monster. Yeah. On the other side, we see an organization maybe running projects for paying customers that doesn't cover its needs. Yeah, so the straight is it should be need, not greed. It should be on a level that is sound for the organization, that's maybe sound for the society, for economics, and so on. I know most managers don't care about that too much, but it must be somewhat sound. If you become too greedy, you will lose a lot. Think of Boeing currently. They were so greedy that they developed the 737 MAX as a safety disaster. Think of Ford with it's long ago, I know, but with the Pinto disaster.
Saving money in the wrong places.
GM with the saddle tank.
Sense.
Think of Volkswagen with their, meanwhile, two disasters. The first one was...
Just think about all the companies, Toyota included, companies that are having to recall thousands of cars.
Yes.
Because their engines are defect.
They did something wrong there.
I mean, and how long have they been in the business?
Airbags.
Yeah.
Airbags. Yeah. The Japanese manufacturer of airbags, I don't remember the name, went bankrupt over a poor product which didn't work. Yeah. So no, but what we see is there is somewhere a middle way, and you clearly have to say 5 to 10% profit from making projects, from doing projects for paying customers, including all those indirect costs. This is simply not enough, because you have to build reserves for times when things go badly, when the going gets tough. Yeah? Then you need some reserves for that. You need more for that. And there's this greedy side on the other side. I fully agree with you. Yeah? But there is somewhere in the middle. There's somewhere in the middle is a way.
Now what you're talking about, and this is something that I think we've all noticed in the last years as well, is this concept of polarity, right? It's either black or white. Most people see black or white. They although most of
they don't see the tension field, the gray shades.
They don't see the range of possibilities in the middle. Actually, I do want to pick up something that we talked about before the podcast started. We talked about what was the term that you used? False friends.
Yes.
You said something in German, and the statement was tiefe Taschen, and I gave you my interpretation. I didn't realize, although I speak German fairly well, that I had the wrong understanding of it. What does tiefe Taschen, which means deep pockets, mean in German?
Deep pockets in German means you are greedy.
Yeah, you want to stuff things.
You have deep pockets. And a lot of things.
You don't need it, but you're taking it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And I said, that's not my understanding as an American. The term deep pockets means that you
can take a lot out.
You're cash rich. You've got cash flow. Deep pockets means this is an investor that I can rely on because they've got deep pockets. They have this financial reserve resilience that we're talking about here a little bit, right? So that's interesting, and I think this polarity and this concept of I think as challenging as my season, I'm going to say this as an American. You mentioned the word social at the beginning of the podcast, and I had to smile when you mentioned it, because you mentioned it in the understanding of traditional Central European, which for you, social means serving for the people, by the people kind of concept, and that's also most of the democracies.
Not quite.
But that is a central concept in Europe, that the concept of a social democratic society.
Yeah. That's not what I'm talking about.
But I wanted to bring that up because this is a big issue when we're talking about greed.
Yeah.
If you mention any kind of justice that goes from companies to people, all of a sudden you're socialist. Which, by the way, a lot of comedians in the internet and on social media mention this. In the United States, the only institutions that benefit from socialist payouts are large companies, pharmaceutical companies, but not the people. Right. So this is, I think, the concept of redefining how democracy and capitalism works and how they can coincide, I think, is a social issue that's going to be interesting also in the next generations, and I think the next generations are going to shape that.
Most Americans don't have a concept of the meaning of socialism and communism. They don't know what it is.
They think it's the same, and it's not.
They think it's a cheap insult.
Yeah, but it's a quick thing to say. I mean, but funny enough, even in the vocabulary of the Americans, the statement "by the people, for the people" is actually already a social concept. And I won't say socialist because I don't want to trigger anybody.
So social, in my understanding, simply means it relates to the relationship between the individual and the society.
But let's talk about another factor, which is, and you talked about it, that there's going to be more control or governance issues coming up to kind of control large business as well, although I think that's an ongoing struggle. I picked up a topic not so long ago where there was an example of a pharmaceutical company that had created a cure for an illness that was very grave and had a huge impact on society, but they did such a good job at it, okay, that they kind of almost went out of business, okay? So I think that's also an example of this balance between, on one side, we want to create a company that has a moral compass, that serves society, that has that factor in play, but also has to survive. So I think these are the whole legal situation and governance issue around it.
When I tell people a contractor has 3 big goals. Goal number 1 is the happy customer. Goal number 2 is protection of the cash flow of the organization,
but
because
not at the
they
cost
lay out
of the customer. Not completely at the cost of the customer.
Negative
cost of the
customer.
Yeah.
take care of the cash flow. And the third one is profitability.
Yeah.
Then I have a lot of people who say, no, profitability, cash flow, this all doesn't matter. The happy customer is the only thing that matters. And then I tell them, if this is how you do project business, you will soon be out of business.
But I think the other extreme would be where we charge, and this is an ongoing issue in comparison between Europe and the United States as well. The cost of medicine in the United States is exorbitantly higher than it needs to be.
Yes.
Because there's no government intervention when it comes to this. In your paper, you had one point that I noted, which I thought was interesting in the wording, and I want to pick your brain on it. And you talked about some of the countermeasures or factors that come into play with stricter regulatory and compliance requirements, geopolitical strife, tensions, war plays a role in the things that we have to navigate in the future, technological disruptions, insolvencies. But the last one was the one that jumped out at me, maybe because I questioned the one word, the degeneracy of the people's minds. What did you mean with that?
I grew up in a generation where people.
Are you going to say like old man things like everybody loves to say it used to be much better in the old?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
absolutely
good.
not. I think there are so many things that are better.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. But one of the things that was clear to everyone was being well educated, in of course in knowledge, in skills, but also in your day-by-day behaviors. Yeah. This was a positive thing. Yeah. Today, people take pride in poor education in a vocational area, in an interpersonal area, how they deal with each other. Yeah, people take pride in being very degenerative in their language, yeah? And in how they this example. What is socialism? What is communism? Is an example of that. It's not only that they don't know what it is; they are proud that they don't know what it is.
I think what you're talking about, which is a social issue as well, is this is also a question between establishment and those that would question establishment, is the difference between scientific approach and scientific method versus feelings and my truths. And I think one of the underlying issues that we have here is what the phenomenon I call the poisoned well. We've never, and to mention one thing that's so much better than it ever was, one of the greatest inventions of humanity has been social media. And I think you can judge, okay, it degenerates people's minds. If you look at little children, you can see it in their eyes that they're in a different place, and you sometimes wonder how healthy it is. But I think one of the reasons why we're so fascinated by the social media is because at one glance, we have a continuous, completely open access to information, and I think it's part of our DNA that we understand that knowledge, the wealth of knowledge, is power. I think the issue that we have here is not that social media per se is bad. The problem we have with social media is that it's filled with crap intentionally to distract us from what could serve us.
It's noise.
Yeah.
Where we should have information. There was this word democratization of the media. Yeah. Everyone can be a journalist. Everyone can be a writer also. Yeah. And first of all, that's a very good thing to have and good thing to do. But the problem is, who are the people who make most noise there?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, one of these extremely noisy people owns one of these social media and uses it as a megaphone.
Yeah.
Someone I was very impressed of some months ago still. Yeah. Found him so impressive. Yeah. But he changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and how people behave towards that, towards these people, how they approach it. In the past, it was very, very clear. If a politician or if a business leader has lots of scandals, sometimes one scandal was enough. Yeah, there was a scandal. This person has to step back from all positions, and this person can no more do this job in the future. Yeah? Now, today, what we see is they're not only staying in the position, people praise them for that, and that's degenerated.
So I think it's the formulation that I might have objected. I think there's a lot of degenerative factors, and I think that's always been part of human society, is that a well-established society always has kind of this degenerative elements that kind of eat away at its foundation. And I would say, yes, that degeneration does have an impact on human minds, but I don't think that the wording, the degeneration of people's minds. I think people's minds are being degenerated by uncontrolled
by noise.
Yeah,
by noise. It's this noise that is all around us. Yeah, it's so. We are here in Austria. Austria, the political situation is driven by noise at the moment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Reasonable politics at the moment are very, very hard to implement because there is so much noise around. Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's this noise.
It's also the weaponization of information. It used to be when
disinformation,
also of information. I'll give you an example. I mean, there's a lot of issues in the United States that you can discuss politically. But I found that I was looking at YouTube the other day, and I noticed a couple people of American and British descent commentating on Austrian politics, and I'm like, what the heck are you guys? You guys are painting it like we're going under here. Yes, it's not a happy situation, but it's not much worse or better than it is there. So I mean, who the hell are you? I mean, I always find it interesting that that Americans are concerned about the politics in Denmark or Sweden or Austria, where it's quite honestly, your political situation is 10 times worse. So I think the weaponization of information in the sense of where you're focusing on and how you exaggerate information is a big issue as well.
I think it's again about this scarcity of attention.
Yeah.
Attention is the scarcest resource of all. This applies for everyone. And as soon as people put a lot of attention on a topic that they find interesting or that captures their emotions, they don't have enough attention available to look at the things that are really valuable and that are worth to be looked at.
Yeah. I think we've done a fairly good job navigating the sentiment that most people feel out there, whether you agree with some of our personal opinions of the situation or the examples that we choose. I think most people would agree that we live in a time of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I'd like to kind of shift gears here, because in your paper you don't just talk about what is, you're talking about potential future, how to shape the future solutions. What do companies, and you do advise companies, and what would you advise companies to do in 2025 to build up this resilience? What are some of the frameworks or concepts or strategic initiatives that they could take to be better balanced and better prepared for the future?
First of all, this article is the first one in a series of 3.
Okay.
So
does this mean I have to invite you back another time?
Oh yeah, next month. Then again. No, the idea is, of course, to focus in the next and the third paper more on the solutions, but I don't want to leave people alone with just, hey, look how bad this world is, and it's all without hope, and so that's not how I want to leave my.
No, that's kind of
my readers.
That's kind of what we try to do in the podcast. Is we want to be critical, but we want to be constructively critical, and always give people. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Even I think some of the most drastic financial gurus ever said. I think it was Robespierre that said, when the streets run red with blood. There's opportunity, It's a terrible statement, but it is true. They
killed him.
Yeah.
They executed him.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but still, I think there's some truth. This is my personal opinion as a formally educated marketing person. There is no detrimental situation where there isn't some kind of light at the end of the tunnel or an upside to it. You just have to be willing to embrace it or do certain measures.
We have to live with it.
Yeah.
First of all, we have to live with it and we have to survive it.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm talking about. It's not so much about opportunity.
Yeah.
There are opportunities, and there are people who know how to take these opportunities. I don't see myself in such a position, and I don't write for these people.
Yeah.
I write for the people who are possibly suffering from what is coming.
Which is more.
It's called the cost of chaos and not the opportunities of chaos. Yeah. I think most people will rather suffer than have a benefit from that. But there will always be some Kriegsgewinner in German. What's the English word for that?
War beneficiaries, I guess. Or profiteers.
Profiteers. Yes, war profiteers. Exactly. We're in Austria. The biggest piece of literature on that has been written in Vienna. Karl Kraus, Die letzten Tage der Menschheit.
The last days of humanity.
Humanity. Yeah. This was this big book on profiteers or drama actually. No, what I recommend companies in project business, first of all, is to make sure they have the reserves to survive difficult situations, to survive situations when the income flow gets disrupted, to have reserves in place. It's monetary reserve, but it's also in people, to make sure you have the right people if something goes wrong, that you have people to fix that.
Not only that, I think this is something that there's an example of lots of good companies. I can think of Siemens as one company who did this many decades ago. When you're going through your different ups and downs of your different volumes of business, that you don't, at the first opportunity, throw out fire people that you're never going to get back.
You may need them very, very soon. And when you fire them, what you also fire is knowledge, it's skills that no one in the organization may have, at least to the same degree than these people, especially older people. It's often the older people that are the first ones, and these may be the people who know better than anyone else how to deal with that. Because they
might be part of your solution.
They might be part of the solution. So the first thing is to make sure that you have a reserve or have reserves in place, and it's money, it is people, it is maybe sometimes equipment, it may be space and many other things. The reserves, you ask yourself, which reserves do we need to have in place to survive that? Then the next thing is, and it comes back to people, make sure your people are educated for project business. PMI, sorry everyone at PMI does not help you in that. PMI disregards project business. I'm at the moment a reviewer of the PMBOK 8th edition, and most of my comments, asking the authors to change something, deal with customer projects. Where are the customer projects? It's all projects that support a business. That's the big topic. Projects that support a business. In project business, they don't support the business. They are the business.
Actually, I can completely, I've said this to you in the last podcast. I absolutely agree with you with that's concerned, because ultimately I think when we get into an economic crunch time, companies are going to reduce their internal projects, and external projects are going to be essential. They're going to be part of their process excellence, their organizational process assets, I think they're called, according to the PMBOK, that will give them a competitive edge in being able to secure better margins, even if the price goes down, or to deal with volatility of supply chain and things like this.
But their customers will also reduce the number of projects they hand out to contractors, because this is there's a place where they can save money immediately. When there's a lot of uncertainty, then their customers may decide, okay, there's a project, we wanted to do it next month, let's do it next year instead. It's not that urgent. We don't have to do it right now. Better we keep our money together. Better we avoid the operational disruptions that come with projects. So the market will, I hope I'm wrong. The market will likely become smaller. The market for project business, which was a growing market for the last, I think, 20 years, is a market that will become smaller, which means that the competition between contractors will become tougher, which means that the margins that they can make from projects go down again at a time when they should go up, because they need margins to build reserves.
Go ahead.
And then the next thing may be that they say, okay, where can we save? We as contractors save money immediately. And then, of course, the number one for them may be, again, their people. I'm
going to tell you, this is where I see the light at the end of the tunnel. If and you have this experience. If we look at some of the project business that's out there, there's a huge amount of waste.
Yes.
Okay, material waste, time waste, and I think we take it into account because the margins are good, and because there's too much to do.
Sometimes we can bill it. Oh, customers get it built by the contractors.
Yeah.
There is waste. Contractors do the waste, and
there's obvious and less obvious waste.
Send an invoice to the customer.
Yeah, but what I think, and this is, I've always been a bit advocate. I think there's going to be a stronger. In German, we say Schulterschluss, going shoulder to shoulder, a process between lean thinking and project management, and also refocusing on the values of developing processes, reevaluating process. I think the whole subject matter around identifying lean and implementing it more strongly in project management to compensate for some of the reduction of costs or margin will be a factor. Would you agree?
I think it's the opposite.
Really?
Lean means to reduce the reserves that you would have in place.
That's not what I'm talking about, lean. What I'm talking about is classical Mudos.
I'm talking about
waste of time,
automotive lean,
waste of materials.
Toyota production system.
Yeah.
But lean, first of all, means you reduce what you think is unnecessary in reserves that you have. Yeah. You have a fridge at home, and normally you have 3 liters of milk in your fridge. Now 1 is enough because the next supermarket is not far away.
Okay, I see how you mean that. Yeah, but
that's a reduction of reserves that you have at home, because you can replace everything very, very quickly. So you make sure that you reduce the amount of reserves that you have to make everything easier and cheaper. A side effect, by the way, of the Toyota production system, until, 4 weeks ago, Toyota was the most inducted production company, industrial company in the world. So interestingly enough, it comes with a lot of debt that they have towards banks. They just got overtaken by Volkswagen, if my understanding, if my numbers are correct. Yeah, but these two are.
I think that's a good example, because it's interesting that you counter that, and I accept your Einwand, we would say, your counterpoint there. Strangely enough, that's never been on my radar when I look at wastes.
I come from automotive, so that's
I look at it more from an operational. This is my strong opinion. I think that a lot of companies are wasting money at places where you say, hey, screw it. It's, we're making so much money. We're not making so much money because we're doing such a good job. We're making so much money because there's so much money to be had. And I think in an economic downturn, I think we need to become more efficient. We need to, and I'm not talking about reducing reserves. I'm talking about reducing waste.
When in Japan, Toyota's production system was developed, we had a similar thing in Germany called REFA, R-E-F-A. I'm not sure if you ever heard of that. It was a system where waste was eliminated from different processes with a stopwatch in the hand. They observed people.
But any system can be violated, and
you can always do it like that. But the problem is then you have a change. Then something changes in the process, and you can restart your REFA or your lean approach again. I think lean is sometimes helpful, sometimes not helpful. Eliminating real waste, yes. But at the same time, in some areas, reserves have to be increased to make processes, to make productions, to make projects disruption-proof. You need, first of all, reserves. And the second thing that you need is well-educated people. Yeah. If you look at the project managers that do customer projects at the moment, most of them are somewhat, if at all, educated for project management as internal project management, but they don't have any education for project business. And PMI is not helpful, because PMI made a decision, this is not our topic, which throws out 50% of our project managers.
More than that.
We are not interested in that. I think it's more than that, yeah. We are not interested in that. We don't care about that. Yeah. I talk with a lot of management people at PMI often enough about this for years now, not just once. And when we talk about it, there's interest there, and then we split again, and it's over. Yeah, it's forgotten again. So what they need is some some good educators. What we all need is some good educators who understand that project business is a business like other businesses.
I'm going to go a step further, and then I want to double down on the education topic because I think it's important. I think there needs to be a rethinking of education as well.
Yes.
Is if we believe the statistics that say 38% of all projects are successful, whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
I think that those that do not meet the targets as they were set are 90,
which is a stupid definition. Go on.
Yeah. What's the stupid definition?
That not meeting the original targets is what constitutes a failure. This is a stupid.
Yeah, that goes a little bit further. But we're talking if we're gonna talk mainstream projects where the target makes sense and it belongs to the known unknown. Okay, I'm not talking about the ones that have to be adapted.
I'm talking about targets that make sense, but that get changed over time.
And I would agree with you from that sentiment. But if we're talking, so we have something to talk about, because I think this is important. So you said that you believe that more than 50% of projects are project business. I think of the projects that fail, however you want to quantify them, the majority are in the business area and not in internal projects.
Careful. We have two views on success and failure. The view of the contractor includes, in my opinion, should include the happy customer, not just satisfied, happy customer, the protection of the cash flow, and the profitability of the project. Good margins that the company can live on. That's a definition for the contractor.
Yeah.
The definition for the customer is completely different to that. They have their own definition. So what we have is an area of sometimes conflicting success and failure criteria.
Absolutely.
Understanding what constitutes success and failure. If you look at big construction projects that France, the nuclear power plant in France, Flamanville, or Hinkley Point C in the UK, similar thing. So for the contractors working there, this is a lot of success. Yeah, they should have been finished with the project years ago, and it still pays money, and it keeps them busy.
Yeah, but once again, my core statement is if you're looking at the long list of projects that are upheld as examples of negative project management process, most of them are project business. They're external projects.
Yeah, but where did they
Berlin,
go? Where did they go wrong?
Hamburg Ape Symphony, the Sydney Opera House, just to name a few. I have people on LinkedIn that are constantly
Big Dick in Boston.
Yeah,
so don't keep USA out.
No,
they're not better.
Yeah,
they're not better.
No, I'm not saying that they are, but I live in Europe, so most of my examples come from this area. Let's get back to education, because I think it's refreshing that you are doubling down and say even in an economic downturn, one of the things that people like to save money on, partly, is on education.
Absolutely.
Right? And you're saying that's not the right way to go.
If you learn driving a car, part of that is technical driving, understanding how the engine works and some other things, and it's learning law. If you want to drive a car, if you want to have a driving lessons, you have to have some basic knowledge.
Foundational concepts.
Of law. You have to understand all the laws. Germany, we have
the rules of the game,
the rules of the street.
Yeah.
You have to know them. Yeah? Otherwise, you will not be safe to drive from A to B, and they may take you out of traffic and take away your driving license. Now, if you go over to project business, we have a very, very similar situation. We work in projects that are very much defined by contracts. So the legal knowledge has to be there. The very basic foundational legal knowledge has to be there. Hey, what is a contract? What do we mean when we say in breach of contract? And it's not the day-by-day business that everyone has. It's very special for projects. Yeah. And it's especially difficult if we are in international projects, because what the law that you know from home may not be the law at the place where this project is being done. So you need legal knowledge. Not finished. Yeah. We need social knowledge and commercial knowledge again. I see so many project managers, they are happy if the project doesn't make a loss. What they don't understand is they are not creating a profit for the organization. They are creating a margin. And many other costs must be paid before at the end there is a profit there. So it's not enough. You had this point before. companies want more margin. First of all, there is a minimum margin that they need to survive. And again, it's not greed, it's need.
Yeah.
So there's a minimum margin.
I'm not complaining about that.
There's a minimum margin. We may make some discussion.
We're constructive capitalists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's a minimum margin, and it's not, the project is not at a loss. The project must provide a minimum margin, and I don't think it's in percentage. It should be in numbers, in naked numbers, in monetary numbers. This is the money that we need from the project so that we can survive as a company. And then you see project managers who reject to deal with it, who don't take,
I don't know how many, I think it's really a minority of project managers that have financial responsibility in their projects, who understand the concept that PMI is trying to push, that they're business case managers. I always find it amazing when you talk to people who are managing multi-million-dollar projects, and they're like, it's not my problem.
Yeah,
I'm like, yes, it is.
It's worse than that. No one is there to have this responsibility. The end-to-end, from the very beginning to the very end of the project, the overall responsibility that this is going to be a temporary profit center that is profitable, creating a margin, that is worth doing. There is no one there. They have someone sitting in business development side, and all they have to do is bring the contract home, bring the customer home. Then there is a deep gap. Then you have the project managers whose job it is. They call it often delivery. It's more than delivery. It's doing the project, managing the project. Yeah. Do they talk with each other?
I actually want to get back to the topic of education, but it ties in with education. My personal experience is I don't think that project managers are adverse to accepting that they might have a major role in the financials of a project. But my experience is that their organizations are compartmentalizing the functions and taking the project manager out of the fray, okay? And I don't understand. And so let me give you an example. There's a large IT company from Germany, which I won't mention. I like them a lot. But I worked for them. But their contracts are so complex, and their system of inputting and creating the invoices is so difficult that's compartmentalized, okay? Sometimes they're called commercial managers or something else. So a project manager can often go throughout a project without worrying about the financials because there's a department or a person who's taking care of it. I still believe, and I'm a big advocate of this, that there needs to be an integration between these two because one player has an impact on the other.
Yes, it's more than that. As a project manager, life is much easier if I don't have to care about money. If I just care about people and tasks and jobs and deliverables. And
that's okay if there's plenty of money to go around.
Yeah, that's dangerous. That's very dangerous because under a lot of money, you can hide cracks inside the organization. And when the sea level of money goes down, the cracks become visible, and it may be too late to change something there. So that's a very dangerous game. But then what I'm saying is, if the project managers, if certain project managers don't have monetary responsibility, makes their life on the first glance much easier. I don't have to care about that. It's someone else's job. It hurts them.
Yeah,
later,
I agree.
When they don't have the authority
or the negotiation power because they don't know what levers to pull.
They have no negotiation power. They have no authority to do certain things because someone else always has the authority.
They're not informed. Partly, most project managers don't even know what their margins are. They don't even know what their margins are.
Yeah. So the problem is, if you as a project manager want to have responsibility for your project, especially if it's a customer project, you need the all-over responsibility. And the company that needs someone to manage a profit center, this project is a profit center. Yeah. So if you have a profit center, you need a profit center manager, someone who has the responsibility. It begins with the first contact with the customer.
I think the term in the PMBOK is benefits management.
No. It's not benefits. No, it is. You said P&L. Yeah, it's P&L authority, P&L responsibility.
If I can jump in here, because you mentioned something that I don't want to slip by, is you said I think that especially in a more complex environment, if we truly have the more modern and technologically accurate attempt that actually projects are meant to success should be primarily defined through satisfaction. I think defining the contracts is important, and the whole concept of adaptable contracts. I think the Agile movement is also kind of stretching the understanding of how to develop contracts. But once again, you cannot have a vendor who has an Agile mindset to make you happier if you have clients that are not willing to do their part. It's like going ballroom dancing and your partner's dancing a different dance. Yes. I think that's an issue there. We're all over the place, and I'm loving this discussion with you, but I do want to get back to one statement that you made beforehand. You said one of the countermeasures, which might sound counterintuitive. Once again, I think the premise is that a lot of companies traditionally, when they're in fear, they reduce FTEs. They fire personnel, which is not always a good long-term or mid-term strategy. The other thing they do is they cut costs wherever they can, which is not my understanding of lean. Okay. My understanding of lean is cut the stuff that you're throwing out the window that has no benefit. The difference between productive and non-productive, right? But you are holding up against it and saying, no, especially in times of turmoil, companies should double down on education, which some people might have a difficulty emotionally underlining. And they might say, yeah, but Oliver, you and Mark, you're too...
It's our business.
It's our business, so yes, obviously we're talking in our favor. Absolutely. You know what? We don't care how terrible you're doing, but make sure you book us. No, just kidding. That's not what we're saying here. I agree with you that that education is important vestige or a good protection against this volatile times. But this is one of my experiences with education. You might have this as well. I'm always shocked, and I'm looking at it from a lean perspective. Companies will often commit to a subject matter. For example, project management. So let's train our staff in project management. And these people come in, they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, okay? And if you do a good job, you can excite them. You have a fun 2-day, 3-day, 5-day exchange, and people are amazed about the prospects and the different fantasy worlds you're opening to them.
Yes.
And then they leave your seminar and they go back to their department. And this is what I always warn my trainees about. I say, listen, I'm gonna give you a harsh.
It's the Chaka seminars.
I'm gonna give you a harsh reality. When you leave the seminar, okay, nobody's gonna come up to you and ask you how it was, what you learned, how you're implementing it, and can I help? It's going to be swept underneath the carpet.
Good that you're back. I have some work for you.
Yeah, and then you try to do something, and they're like, "What are you doing?" No. Stick to the game. Yep. Game plan. I agree with you. I think we trainers are also challenged in this perspective. I think there's a deeper form of learning that needs to be addressed as well, which means, we often say that a training will create a certain motivation curve up here, and then there's usually a rapid decline of motivation to do it. I'm always amazed, especially if you're in a company over multiple generations of project managers. You'll have generations of project managers you've trained, so they all have the same language, they all have an understanding of the same process, but it's kind of everybody's afraid to be the first one to implement it. So from a management perspective, I think that education should not just be reduced to middle management and operational staff. I think education also, this is just one of the measures, needs to be addressed, even if it's in a shorter version for executives and senior managers.
Let's go one step further.
Please do.
What I'm talking about is not just education of project managers. They are at the heart and soul of this education. But it's more than that. It is a change in mindset of an organization. It's the understanding we are not just running some projects for paying customers. We have profit centers. And the three big things, again, sorry to repeat myself, customer happiness, cash flow, liquidity, staying liquid, that's it, and profitability.
But I often find
all three must be in place. It's not just one big goal and everything is under that. The mission success of the customer project includes all three elements.
But that does not supersede the need for understanding what a project needs on a day-to-day, on an operational, because I completely agree with you, but just like we were talking about beforehand, that project managers often have this invisible wall. They say, that's not our job. Strategy, vision, financial responsibility, margins, P&L is not our problem. And I find on the opposite side of this invisible wall, you have a bunch of executives that say, don't bother me with that operational crap. I have a higher order of responsibility, and that is to make sure that this company survives. And I'm like, yeah, but where's the integration here? The integration doesn't just need to be bottom up, it also needs to be top down.
The integration must come from the top, absolutely. The understanding that if you are a company that does customer projects, that you have to treat each of them as a profit center, and then you treat them as a whole, as a portfolio of profit centers, projects as profit centers. Mm-hmm. This is something that must begin at the top. If you start this on the project manager level, they will never be able to bring this idea sufficiently up to the top, because it's a change in the understanding of the organization, how it works and what it actually is. It's about the justification of existence of this company. Most companies that do projects for paying customers, in their understanding, the idea, first of all, is, we have a new technology that we brought in maybe 10, 15 years ago. We made a lot of money with that, and we found out we have to provide project managers to bring this into the organization, help our customers maybe. So this is how they began. This is how this all began. And now they are at a point where the whole thing operationalizes, where this becomes a regular business. This customer project is over, now we start the next customer project, and so on. The thing operationalizes. But the problem is then that they organize themselves as functional organizations. And the biggest gap that I see is really, on one side, there is business development. In older times, you would have said sales. Mm-hmm. Today, they're called business development. On the other side is what is called business, or what is called project delivery. We would just have called it project management, or just a project in the past. And there's a big gap between those two. It's very, very deep. When the business development people and the project managers talk with each other, what you often hear is finger pointing. Mm-hmm. The project manager says, you sold the project too cheaply. How do you expect me to make that?
It's a classical conversation.
You accept the deadlines that I cannot meet, and so on. Technical solutions that we don't have. And then from the other side, from the business development side, the counter argument is, you have to be more customer friendly. You don't have the customer at your heart and at your soul and in focus, so many other things. So it's finger pointing. It is allegations. And these allegations are extremely disruptive. And these are the cracks under the ocean of money. When the money flow gets lower and lower, and the level of money
when the oxygen goes down in the room, people start panicking.
You see the cracks, and then it's often too late. I saw companies going bankrupt on that. I have one specific example I still remember. It was a printing company in Augsburg some years ago, and they went bankrupt exactly on that point. And some years before, they made an awful lot of money, and then this money flow drained off, and then these cracks were visible. And then I was asked, Oliver, can you help us? They asked me, and I said, sorry, it's too late. It's too late. The place where you are, I as a trainer can no more help.
There's a point of no return where you're like, now it's.
Where you as a trainer cannot do anything. Maybe a consultant can do something there, but that's not my job. My job is the trainer. I do some consultancy, but that's not my main job.
I've taken some notes so that I have a little bit of a checklist. If I can derive from some of the valuable statements you made, financial integration from project managers being more aware that their business case managers is one solution to the upcoming crisis that we're facing. On the other side, creating an executive understanding of being more involved on an operational level so that we can come up with more realistic requirements for clients.
So the executives are often not even project champions, but what they actually should be. They're not even sponsors. That's what I want to say. They're not even project sponsors.
Or accountable executives.
What they should be is project champions.
Yes.
They should be the people who really push the project manager. And
they should be protecting. I think
protecting.
I think the protecting factor is one of the most ignored sponsor responsibilities.
And give and pay them their attention.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of at the beginning, we talked about maybe a more diversified approach to sales, maybe changing your Pareto concept. There was one thing we talked about. We talked about continued education and maybe and creating also maybe follow-up sessions where the education is not just a one-time thing, but that you have, maybe
the education as part of an organizational change program. And the organizational change program is to understand that each project is a temporary profit center and has to be treated as a profit center and managed as a profit center.
And I think that education actually takes place once the first initial education cycle comes, is you have to create a workshop scenario where people can come and with their real life problems and say, okay,
absolutely,
I appreciate you as a trainer, but let's talk about real life. Let's talk about my situation. How do we deal with it, right? So these workshop scenarios.
I have companies involved in project business, and that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
We meet every other month for 3 month session, 3 hour session. And in this 3 hour session, they talk about their. And
you can refresh things that
I learn a lot.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. That's really huge. I think one thing that I kind of took away from me, or maybe I brought into the thing, is the concept of lean, but lean in the sense of focusing on what really matters. Maybe also developing a concept of setting priorities or understanding that less is more. Maybe focusing on what's most important. If you don't have the money to take care of everything, make sure that you're taking care of the most important things and not wasting it on the things that are inconsequential. We talked about that. I kind of derived from what you were talking about. You reiterated how important the customer is, and I think it's a difficult thing for a project manager to adhere to because we have these classical parameters that define customer. I think most project managers are fearful for the concept of customer satisfaction. If scope, time, and cost are unrealistic, how am I going to make you happy? We often say if you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, satisfaction is not a constraint.
I would see it the other way around. First of all, I'm not happy with the word satisfaction. I want happiness here. Yeah. That's more. That's emotional. Satisfaction is just okay. Right.
I'm going to go a step further, though. I'm going to stand up for project managers. At the end of the day, as a project manager, I want to deliver what the customer is willing to pay for. I'm not just like in a relationship, and I've been in a couple marriages, so I'm going to maybe get personal here, right? You are not responsible for the happiness of your partner.
Of course you are.
No, you can contribute to it, but happiness is a personal issue. And in a bilateral relationship, which brings me to another subject, if you create a relationship where the project manager has no access to their own executives, and they have no access to the client because we live under this false pretense of one face to the customer. Okay, but all that happens is that over this wall, everybody's throwing their problems over the fence and saying, "Hey, deal with it."
That's not happiness.
There's no way to create happiness. There is no grounds. There's no.
Happiness is the smile on the face of those people on customer side who matter. Yeah, may not be all of them.
Yeah.
So happiness means to me that they want to come back, that they bring their friends with them. That's what I mean.
I think we're going to have to do a separate podcast on that one.
Yeah, and that's more than satisfaction. Kano modeling, you may be aware of that. Yeah, that's where I see this. Yeah, that's top level.
You mentioned that this is the first of several articles to follow. 3. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be even more, knowing you. So this is I guess this is one of your.
Make a new series.
Is this your New Year's resolution for this year to say, okay, you're taking the bulls by its horn? This is one of our slogans at the PM-Cowboy, to say, listen, this is something I think that is pertinent for 2025. I have for the first quarter, or maybe for the first 2 quarters, I have some concepts that I want to deal with and also maybe provide my clients. But knowing you probably might extend it over the year as things develop.
The top word is resilience.
Yeah.
This is the top topic. Yeah, this the focus topic of that is resilience. So the question is, what can organizations do in times that are likely, I hope I'm wrong, that are likely to become more difficult for them to survive this. Yeah. And the first thing is to understand where the cost of chaos is coming from. The second thing is to understand how they should respond to that. And then the last thing is, maybe there is an opportunity for them that would not have been around for 4 years ago or so. Yeah. So this is where I see it. But it's really based on On personal experience, I made 2018, 19, made at that time, and I'm afraid this time will be much more difficult.
I'm going to use. I love the word resilience. It's a beautiful word. Where we actually have a podcast planned later on this month, and I'm not going to tell you who the guest is. A very interesting guest who's going to talk about resilience from a different perspective. I think resilience is a brilliant word, and I think it's definitely something we need. But it's a similar ambiguous emotional term as the word happiness. And as a hardcore process-oriented manager, I know you. I know that you have more of a concept than just saying the word happiness or resilience. There's a process that can contribute. It won't create resilience, but it can contribute to it.
You never know whether you're resilient enough for the future. That's one thing.
Yeah.
You can build some resilience.
Yeah.
You can have your reserves in place. You can have your also emotional resilience, by the way, that things that go wrong don't disrupt, don't destroy you personally or destroy your teams. That there is not this depression coming up or burnout or so. So it has several aspects here, and they all matter at this point. But the most important thing is you have to develop it before the problems are there.
And now you're talking my language. My problem with these beautiful words is that we like to write them on banners. We like to throw them around. And at the end of the day, you don't achieve something like happiness or resilience if you don't have an understanding of breaking it down into its individual action items, training people, creating a common language, having a framework, having foundational concepts. I absolutely agree with you that it's illusionary to believe that you can control such dynamic elements just through processes. But processes can definitely increase your probability of being able to manifest these two things.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oliver, I've had a really good time. Thanks for your contribution. We'll stay in touch. We'll put a link for this article also at the bottom of this podcast. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see each other in the
future again.
In the future again.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next time will be the question: do we see this? Sadly, I'm not happy about that. Yeah, but what I predict what is going to happen, or am I just wrong? And
wouldn't we love to be wrong?
I would love to be.
I would love to be wrong too.
I would love to be wrong.
I think we all would be. So on that note, starting of the year, this was not meant to be a boo-boo session where we just complain. I think we both have a motivated mindset and have some plans on how to deal with the cost of chaos. I hope this was valuable to you, and we'll hear from each other soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.